The numbers are right. Everything reconciled. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.
Hey, it's Cashflow Mike, and welcome back to another episode of the Clear Path to Cash. And this week we're going to be talking about that post-tax season gap that nobody talks about. So tax season ends in a strange way for a lot of advisors, right? You're spending months pushing towards deadlines. Every week has an urgency behind it. Clients are calling, documents are coming in late, numbers are getting finalized, returns are going out the door. And then one day it slows down. And for a minute, it feels like relief. And just after that, it settles a little, another feeling usually shows up, and a lot of advisors start realizing that even though the work got finished, many of the underlying problems are still sitting there, right? Exactly where they were before. So I was talking to a member recently who described it pretty honestly. They said they delivered a large batch of returns over the previous few weeks, and technically everything went well. The clients got the reports, the filings were complete, nobody was really upset. But afterward, they started thinking about the conversations they had during the tax season. Several clients had cash flow pressure. Some were struggling with just margins. A few had debt concerns that clearly weren't going away. And even though the compliance work had completed, the clients were still asking the same questions. They were asking the same questions, right? The same things that they asked right before tax season started. So they'd move the needle nowhere. What do we do now? Right? That's the part people don't talk about enough. Tax preparation handles an important responsibility. It organizes information. It satisfies requirements. It gives clarity around what already happened in the past. But most clients aren't just going to sit there and wonder whether the forms were completed correctly. They're trying to understand, what happens next in the business. And that's where advisors often start feeling a different kind of pressure just after tax season. The deadlines are over, but the client situations are still unresolved. And sometimes that creates an awkward transition because during the busy season, there's always another deadline pulling the conversation forward. But once that urgency disappears, the advisor is left sitting in front of a bigger business question that still needs attention. I think a lot of advisors feel this shift without really naming it, right? The work got done. The clients appreciated it, but there's still that sense that the business hasn't really moved very far. That's a gap, right? So I was walking through this with the member, and we were using the Clear Path to Cash app just a few weeks ago. And one of the clients had just wrapped up tax season and wanted to talk about why cash still felt tight, even though revenue had been growing. Well, the advisor already understood the financials pretty well. The tax work had completely, just organized everything for him. He had a lot more clarity just by going through that exercise. And what they needed was a way to shift the conversation from that historical reporting into decision making. So we started with the framework. We looked at the issue the client was actually feeling pressure around, and it was cash flow. I guess then what we did is we identified what was driving it, because we used Minding Your Business for Hidden Cash, and we reviewed the receivables, the inventory, and the vendor timing. That's pretty much where all of the pressure had come from, right? The businesses started carrying too much inventory compared to their current sales pace, right? That changed that whole conversation completely. It wasn't about revenue anymore. The clients stopped talking about generally, or just in general, having cash flow problems. They started focusing on specific operational issues that could be addressed. And from there, we were able to map out, what the next step the client could act on over the next month. There's a big difference between finishing the work and creating movement, right? A lot of clients just leave tax season with information. Very few leave with a plan. And that's where advisors have an opportunity right now, because once the compliance pressure slows down, clients start paying attention to the business itself again. And they start asking questions, different questions about growth and cash, about hiring, questions about whether the business is actually moving in the right direction. And that's where advisory work starts becoming more valuable. And that's where advisors realize that they need more than reports and spreadsheets. they need answers, right? They need a structure for working through business decisions with the client while that conversation is happening. And that's what the ClearPath to Cash app was designed to support, right? It's a system that helps organize the thinking behind the conversation so the advisor can move from the numbers into practical next steps without getting stuck in analysis. So if you felt that post-tax season stall before, you probably already know exactly what I'm talking about, right? The deadline is going to disappear, but the client situation is going to stay with you. And eventually the clients ask the question, right? Okay, now what? So if you want to see how we transition inside the app, I want you to go to explore the interactive demo and pay attention to how we turn actions, from insight, right? We turn actions from data, right? We turn into the action that has to take place next, because that's where the conversation starts to change. In that moment where we go from reports to getting things done, we know it. And the ClearPath to Cash was built for that moment.
The numbers are right. Everything reconcile. Nothing is missing. There's more data than ever, and less room to think. So what do we actually do next? That's the moment you realize the math was almost helpful.